Okay, I'm just going to make it a bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so welcome to module 3 and well done for your commitment. It's a hot night. You could have been out now having a nice cold gin and tonic in the garden, but you're here. So, thank you very much for giving us your time again. Tonight's module is thinking about play in the context of the adopted child. And it's just, I started talking about it a bit last week, just because sometimes, you know, for the children in your care, whether that's through like a coming through to you as a foster placement or becoming part of your family through adoption, you know, the children, you know, are there for a reason. And part of that is because of often living very chaotic kind of situations, maybe neglectful situations where they've not had the opportunity to play. Lynn, your children have never been to the beach. You know, so they've maybe not had like a variety of experiences that maybe a lot of other children have had. So when we think of play, you know, often we think about it as something fun and something natural for children to do, a way for them to communicate. But sometimes when children's lives have been punctuated by trauma or distress, or you know, the parents got mental illness or something, they maybe not have had the same access to play, you know, to play resources. So you've all been really resourceful in the last week, you know, and you found ways to play, like using pasta and pipe cleaners, but maybe their parents weren't able to do that. You know, maybe they actually spent all the day just sat in front of the TV, or maybe also they've had like lots of different placements, so they've never had the chance to kind of really get stuck in to play, or they had one set of toys in one house and they went somewhere else, there's a different set of toys. So play in this context can just be different for these children. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to just dip, I'll not make it heavy, right, but we're going to just look into a particular, like, it's more of a model really than a theory. It's about called the embodiment, projection and role model. So we're going to look at that model, we're going to look at different stages of play within that model, and then we'll also look at what happens when a stage has been missed out or not completed successfully. And this model, the EPR model, it's discussed in this book, Introduction to Developmental Play Therapy. I really enjoyed that book when I first read it many years ago when I was a student, but it's by a lady called Sue Jennings. So she, I guess by trade, is a drama therapist, but she's in this book, she's talking about play. So a lot of the play, she does end up kind of talking quite a lot about drama in it as well. But I just find this model really helpful. And I find it helpful that when I was working with children, sometimes I'll be like just observing what the play was and what kind of play they were doing. And it kind of gave me a bit of a marker of where the children were in terms of the play, where they were and where they were maybe emotionally, because this play model, it's looking at the 3 different types of play that children progress through. And then once they've achieved all of them, they'll dip back. But sometimes you might have a child who's 5, but they're very into sensory play. And when children are doing that, it's maybe a marker that they've not been able to complete that type of play in the first opportunity that they were able to achieve it. So it can kind of give you a marker of where they are. So the first type of play that a child will normally begin with once they're born, well actually in utero, because the babies play with the placenta, don't they, and they're always rolling around, and that's quite a sensory experience. But it's embodiment play, which is sensory play, and that starts from in utero to around 2 years old. And that play sometimes maybe doesn't always look like play. So, you know, it can just be feeling things. It can be, you know, mushing food in the hands. You know, anyone who's had a very young child knows that, you know, it ends up all in the hair, and, or, you know, it's a full body experience, isn't it, having a meal sometimes, you know, so like very sensory stuff. You know, and a lot of the stuff that children are given to play with at that age, when you look at toys, it's all very sensory, isn't it? You know, you get like sensory balls or things that are fluffy, you know, like velcro-y things. So they've been exposed a lot to texture and sensation. physical sensation. And what play like that does is it helps a child develop their body self. So that sense of like, what is me, what isn't me. So it starts to help them form their idea of where their body is, what their physical boundary is. Because when a baby is born, it basically just thinks it's a head, and the sight isn't very good, is it? I think when they're like newborns, it's probably just, if you held like a baby up and cradled in your arm, kind of up to your chest, they can only really see about as far up to your kind of face, and then it kind of gets fuzzy. So over time and with these sensory experiences, they start to learn that there's more of them than just a head and maybe a hand, because of maybe that, and then they get to see that they've got feet, and then they start to feel things. So they're developing that sense of body, and it takes them a while to achieve that. So that sensory play is really like one of the key pieces of play that children engage in at that age. And then once they've achieved that, it's not that they stop doing it, but then they would move on then to also incorporate projective play. So that's the kind of play where you're playing through toys or stories. So they might have like farmyard figures or toy dolls, teddy bears, and they're making stories, with those. So the cows and the pigs are talking to each other, or they're doing pictures, and they're making a picture with the story. So they're making a story with the picture. So they're projecting. So it's stuff that's going on for them, or things that they want to kind of play out or make sense with, but they're doing it through like the medium of another toy. And that normally starts around 2 years old. And what that kind of play is doing is it's encouraging thinking about the outside world and their relationship to others. So when children are born, it's all just about themselves and maybe those very immediate people in their families, like the primary carer, maybe like a few family members. And then as they get older, the world starts to expand. So then there's maybe like they start getting more play pals, maybe they start going to nursery, and so the world is getting bigger. And so then they're starting to think about themselves in relation to the outside world and how they have relationships with others. And so a great way to kind of do that is through projective play. So in the past, we've talked about how play really helps with that emotional and social development, and projective play is really setting the foundation for that. The next type of play is role play, the type of play that when you say it to an adult in a training session, it just makes most of us shudder. Don't make me do this. But children actually quite enjoy this play normally. And that's where they start to act out using dramatic play. And you would typically start to see that around 3.5 years. So that's when they're actually taking on being a character themselves. So they are being, I'm trying to think who's popular right now. They are being Hey Doggy, or I don't know, a Star Wars character, or I'm trying to think who else. Oh, my kids are really into Bluey at the moment. It's a new program. Well, it's been on Disney Plus for a while, but now it's on CBeebies. So taking on those kind of favorite characters and playing out being that character, or even just doing things like playing out, being a teacher or being a doctor, or being the digger driver. So they're starting to do that, and they can do that play by themselves, or they will do it with alongside other children. So they start playing some games together. And what that play is doing, it's developing empathy, because you're starting to kind of think about how the other character feels. You're playing a character, so you're starting to think about how your character feels, and it's developed. So you are developing conscious, so they can, because they're having to really be aware of others and these feelings and what's kind of going on. And they're also thinking about a moral code as well. So to kind of to be in these characters and for the characters to get along well, how do they kind of negotiate that? How do they play fairly? But also quite often in that play too, children at that age who are starting to get, they're quite black and white on things, aren't they? There's very little kind of grey yet. So things are bad and good. So my son, well, he's nearly 5, but he still plays out stuff now. Like, he's the police officer and he's chasing the baddies. It's that kind of play. Where something's wrong, something's right. You see it in a lot of children's programs then as well, where they've got like a dilemma and something's gone wrong and someone has to kind of problem solve or rescue. And all that kind of stuff is helping them to kind of develop that moral code, which helps them to socialize, to be well socialized children and adults, to kind of get on well. So you can kind of see, also, I guess in some of this, why some of these types of play can also be problematic for children, who have had some very difficult experiences. We'll touch on it a bit more later. But you can see, when children haven't been able to kind of follow that kind of usual developmental path, when it's been interrupted, that these types of play can also be difficult for them. Yoni, I'm going to hand over to you for a second, because we're going to go out into the breakout room. And just thinking our groups, I think we'll just be small groups tonight, won't we? But when you were a child, what was your favourite type of play? Was it embodiment, the sensory play? Was it projected play, or was it the role play? And then think about what kinds of play that you still like to do now. So you might be thinking about your hobbies or interests. So we'll just spend just a few minutes to think on that, Yoni, just having a wee chat about that. There we go. Hi there.
Oh,
Gonna get myself.
hiya. Hi.
Yeah.
There we go. Right, is everyone back in the room, as they say?
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
I was quite pleased with this photograph because it actually looks like on the boys' t-shirt. It does say EPR, but I think it's NPR. But I was like, oh, really pleased when I saw it.
Perfect.
Yeah. So in our group, I think we quite liked quite a lot of role play.
Yeah.
Some projected play, not so much the messy play.
Mm.
We got that in the other group.
Exactly the same, I think.
Mhm.
But we were saying with Marcus, you can't remember so much, can you?
No, I can't remember the very earliest play, but I can remember doing role play when I was a little bit older.
Yeah. And could anyone see the kind of interest or the things they enjoyed most in play when they were younger, kind of coming out in your interests or hobbies now?
Yes,
Mhm.
definitely.
Yeah.
I remember doing loads of role playing, with my friends playing, schools, one was the teacher or the child, and then shops and all that sort of. And then when I tended to play with my friends' children, I sort of find myself doing that, all the role play stuff. And I was saying there's a place there called Role Play Lane, which is brilliant. So they go in and they've got the vets, the supermarkets, all the different things. It's brilliant.
Here in Glasgow, like play villages, aren't they? And they're great.
Yeah.
When they're open again, they've not been open for, well, since
Yeah.
lockdown.
It's only just opened back up now. Yeah.
Yeah. Lynn, what did you kind of think that you'd kind of carried through from your own
I
experience?
would say a lot of it was sort of role play for me, emptying all the tins out of my mum's cupboards and playing shopkeeper and things like that. And was just saying that the children that I look after through the progression of, and especially through lockdown, I think it's learnt me so much more of structuring different plays and being so inventive, even down to bath time, making it more special than just having a wash. The colour paints, the wall art, the letters everywhere, making words, drawing on my tiles, and just really having to go into your creative skills and digging deep. And there's quite a big age gap between me and my sisters, so even though I'm not an only child, I were growing up, and the focus I got of the one-to-one attention, and the role playing that we did, and the plasticine everywhere, and I'm like, now, right, plasticine's outside, you're not having that in the front room.
Yeah, but it does play havoc with the carpet, doesn't it? If you get the bit that played
just your pasta shells in your empty Coke bottles. They think it's magical. Paint your pasta and put it in the bottles, and we're playing shakers and making music, and I do think lockdown has taught me a lot, as in reliving the basics of play. Because everything else has been taken away. Your bowling, your pitches, your play centres, your parks were closed. You are back to the basics of what you've got under your own roof, and I think it's reinvented me in that way to develop all those new creative skills again.
Yeah.
Really has.
I was saying, something on the local TV that was saying that adults had taken up art and crafts in huge numbers over that lockdown. So I suppose that's likely to impact on the children as well. Sorry, you were going to say? Really?
No, we were just saying that because Albie only came to us 11 months ago, so it's been through all the lockdown. But the plus side, he's definitely, it's really helped the bonding process, because it has been all this play, with just us or one-to-one. So it has been beneficial in that sense, but difficult, as you say, not being able to get out so much.
Yeah, only doing parks. Yeah, but it's right, and I think it's just really good points you all raised, that it's before maybe we kind of thought play had to be something outside of the house or something big, or and what it's done is kind of stripped it play back a bit to kind of think, actually, what can I do? How can I be creative with what I've got around me? And in turn, doing that and spending that time with each other in a different way, is it helped to kind of maybe kind of kindle your relationships more. I mean, I do think actually sometimes it is nice to be going out to the structured activities, definitely when the children are younger. You can go to like a class, or I used to take my kids to like storytelling classes, and some of them had like, they make it into like a bit like a whole like sensory experience and stuff. And actually, when you've got young ones and you're sleep deprived, it's great if just another adult will just take over for half an hour and think of that kind of stuff for you.
Yeah.
And there's still value in that, because it can be really quite creative, can't they? But it's kind of nudged us to be more creative with what we do at home as well. So yeah, we've all learned something. Okay, let's move on a little. So we've got these 3 types of play: embodiment, projection, and role. And then once a child has been able to fully explore one type of play, then they'll move on to the next stage, but they can also still revisit the previous stage as well. And then when the children have got all the 3 stages, then they'll just dip in and out of all 3 types of play. And we'll still do that ourselves. So like, given the chance, some of you might like arts and crafts or ceramics, or go and swimming. They're all really sensory things. Or you might like going to like a drama class, or just in your work, just enjoying, maybe a job where you have to kind of go into a different kind of a role, like being a teacher or so, where you kind of like, you're putting on a different kind of professional hat. You're like playing a role out, aren't you? So we can keep dipping in and out of that. But when a child's play has been interrupted, or they've not been given the opportunity to like fully form, that kind of type of play, then they'll often go back to this type of play, and they will keep playing with that until they have fulfilled their needs through this play. And this is why I find this model really helpful, because it was always really good for me when kids came to me, if they came in and they were just making one holy mess with the paints, and I thought, right, okay, I could just kind of see where they are and what they needed to kind of achieve. And then what I'd often notice was, as they kind of satisfied, I guess, their kind of need for that play to kind of complete that kind of play, to have explored it fully, then I could see them moving on to different types of play, be that like the projective play or the role play. Things were less messy. So it was just a really good gauge for me on where the children were. And I wasn't trying to ever like force the children to do, like I'd like look at the notes or something and think, oh, I think this child needs to do some embodiment play. I would always just let them come and play how they wanted and just start where they wanted to start. But it's a good marker just to kind of help gauge where they are. And I'm just going to dip into a case study a little. I used to work in residential homes, and I used to go in one. It was just teenagers, and there was this one boy called Connor, who was 15, and he'd not actually been removed from the family home until he was a teenager. But there'd been social work involvement with the family since he was actually a very young child. And if you actually read his notes, it did leave you wondering why he wasn't, and his siblings weren't removed earlier. But often it said the social worker asked Connor, and he said he wanted to stay at home, and the social worker just let them stay at home. That's a whole other topic, isn't it?
Sadly.
Yeah, but so when he came in to live in this residential home, we invited him to come and kind of just spend some time with me. And Connor was this kind of guy, he was really street, he was always getting in trouble because he was always going AWOL, and he was, there was always at the police out looking for him, he was always coming back stoned, and he was a streetwise boy. He was also really nice and had this great sense of humor as well, which is probably very much part of his survival mechanism and how he kind of got through life. But a really nice guy, and he came into the room, but when he played, I had all sorts of stuff, so there's like art and craft materials, dens, loads of toys. There's a lot of kind of stuff. but he really gravitated towards the sand. And as I like just sat next to him as he played with the sand, he wasn't so much playing with the toys, it was just the way he kind of worked with the sand. It was like sitting next to a toddler. It was quite visceral, the feeling. It was just like, gosh, and it really just showed me where he was in terms of his emotional development, because all of a sudden, you know, there was Connor, the kind of a smoking, you know, going AWOL from the unit kind of lad, you know, and here he was, this very fragile, very young boy, and it really kind of showed me where he was in terms of his emotional development. So it was just really useful to see that, very powerful experience actually. And I think actually he really felt the power of that. You know, and he did so many sessions that he started to decline. But then actually not long after that, I think he actually turned 16. And I don't know if the rules are different now, but then he had the option, you know, if he wanted to go home, he could. And so he did. I think that the day of his 16th birthday, he just decided he was going to go home. But you know, those moments we had were powerful. So let's have a quick look now at we've looked at what these types of play look like, but if we just start to think about, you know, what it looks like when a child hasn't had these opportunities to play. So the embodiment play is given a sense of what is me, what is not me, a sense of the body and the space around it. So for a child who hasn't had that experience, you might notice that they really struggle with like understanding their own body, their own space, themselves in relation to others, how they kind of move the body. They might not like a lot of sensory experience, or they might just go the other way and just be like really quite engrossed in it, given the opportunity to do it, because I've never had that before. You know, and experiences also, not just about the absence of play, but experiences such as physical and sexual abuse, they can disintegrate the physical boundaries of a body. So then anything a child's built up about, you know, what their own body is, those physical and sexual experiences can really kind of take those physical boundaries away. Did we talk earlier about, I'm not sure if I talked about a girl I worked with once who had been sexually abused that I worked with, and she came in one day and just played with paint, but it was so unbounded, you know, she was really immersed in it, but it actually became, you know, she was just like head to toe in paint. But you know, part of that was, I think she was just really trying to re-experience you know, the embodiment play, but also you could kind of really tell that she kind of lacked the physical boundary as well, that had been kind of taken away from her. A confident body self can take reasonable physical risks in play and vice versa. So, you know, with a child who hasn't had, you know, these experiences in sensory play, you might see the opposite to that. You know, and it was in the very first session when we were looking at the work of Stuart Brown, and how he talked about when children hadn't had those experiences of play, how things that should be joyful and like pleasant surprises actually kind of experience as shock, and maybe unpleasant experiences. So you can imagine, you know, when children get to play with things like squashing blueberries or squishing pasta, you know, cooked pasta in the hands and just getting messy and, you know, getting sauce or yogurt or something all over them, they're exploring, and it can feel, you know, it's messy and it kind of feels okay. But, you know, maybe for later on when the children haven't had those experiences, later on, they can be quite uncomfortable feelings as well, because they've not kind of had that kind of early kind of experience and exposure to the sensory play. When a child has an absence of projective play, you know, they can struggle to develop and sustain relationships. They can be quite rigid in their thoughts, and they can struggle with change. So again, that kind of links back to the work of Stuart Brown and other people. You know, it's all about like how so much of play is about negotiation and learning about relationships and how to kind of problem solve in relationships. And the projective play is really just starting, it's laying the foundation down for that. So when children again haven't had this opportunity to play and to kind of like think about how you know, the tiger feels in the play, you know, and how the giraffe might feel, you know, then and how they kind of maybe solve a problem together, you know, that when it comes to real life can really translate into that kind of difficulty in social settings for those children, and being quite rigid because I've not had to think the way you know, around a problem or how something feels from someone else's perspective. And that foundation, as I said, is just laid down in the projective play, and then is really developed in the role play. So when we're kind of seeing that lack of role play in a child's life, you know, it can really show up in like the lack of ability to empathize, because they've not put themselves in different roles. They can miss the chance to develop their own sense of right and wrong, and all those grey bits in between that come when they're a little bit older. So Jennings is talking about you know, role play when the children like 3.5 or so, but you know, role play kind of lasts, you know, quite a long time, and they develop that, you know, that moral code. It starts very kind of black and white, and then it kind of goes, you know, then they start getting the nuances of stuff a bit more. But children who don't have this chance, you know, who are not playing goodies and baddies, for once, for want of the better word, but that's how we used to call it when I was at school, you know, and playing out those scenarios, you know, can really miss out on that. And you know, for some of the children in our care, you know, some of their parents have been the baddies, and you know what I mean by that is because maybe, you know, they've got parents who, I'm not saying the parents are bad, I'm just saying they've played the role of like the baddie, you know, because I've had parents who are like in prison, who have committed crimes, who have been, you know, they've seen the parents being in trouble with the police, you know, so and sometimes they have like a different, they comment to you with a different kind of moral code about what's okay and what's not okay, you know, so they can be kind of missing out on those opportunities to kind of develop their own sense of what right and wrong is, and also that struggling to work cooperatively and to problem solve. You know, a lot of that can be done through role play, thinking about kind of working together as a team, solving a problem as a team. You know, children play stuff like, so they're in a group, they're playing in a group, and a baddie takes one of their friends away or something, or one of them's playing a dog and they take the dog away, and then the rest of the children have to think about how they're going to go and save the dog. You know, it's all stuff like that that's actually really giving them like a lot of life skills for later on. And how they're going to like solve problems and work together as a team. So maybe I don't know if this also kind of just provokes maybe thoughts of maybe like previous work colleagues or something who maybe are a bit deficit and role play as children or something.
I can think of a few
at work. You can apply the scale to them as well. So just a quote from Jennings. From birth, the dramatic imagination is developed through the stages of embodiment, projection, and role, so that by the time they are 5, they are able to play in dramatic form, which is like the role play. And this is the bedrock of their emerging socialized and civilized behavior. So again, it's just really reinforcing the importance of play and seeing all these different kinds of play and how they're really, you know, they're helping to kind of build the child and make them into, you know, children who are able to kind of be social and cooperative and civilized. I'm not quite sure but how I really feel about the term civilized child. But, you know, children who can kind of get by in life, you know, and can kind of manage at school and manage in the family setting and manage friendships. You know, all these types of play are really important for that. So just in summary, and then we'll go to questions in a minute. Children need to complete all 3 stages of the EPR model. It's important that they kind of dip into all of those. And normally they're achieved around the age of 5. but you might find, you know, when children haven't had the opportunity to do that from birth and just kind of naturally kind of progress through these different stages of play, that it will take them longer to get there. Children will go back to stages even when they've completed them well, you know, because kids still like getting messy when they're 5 and when they're 9. You know, when they're older, we still like getting messy sometimes as adults, not all of us, but some of us. And children will go back to complete stages that they haven't had the chance to finish, as it was, when they're given the opportunity to do so. So I guess just part of the thinking around, you know, why we're kind of presenting this too, is just to say, you know, just to give your children just a variety of play experiences, because they might not have had the chance to do so before. So you might have children who are older, and you might actually think that like doing like messy sensory play stuff like finger paints or playing with sand, or, you know, playing with clay or something, they might be a bit too big for that. But actually, like in my case study with Connor, actually he actually really just gravitated to that sand and really needed to kind of have that kind of play. And so it might be the same for your children too. So just expose them to all the different kinds of play is really helpful. And, you know, they'll probably gravitate to some more than others. You know, some children just don't like messy stuff, you know, and if you've got a child who just can't tolerate sand, or, you know, like slimy or, you know, liquidy stuff, you know, just give them things like trays of lentils or rice, you know, things that can easily build up on stuff that's not maybe so kind of sensory stimulating, but just give them that opportunity to do so they can kind of complete all these stages. So we've got a takeaway task. So just this week, just to observe your child or children and just look at what kinds of play they engage in most, the embodiment, the projective play, or the role play. Do you think they seem to have missed some types of play, and how can you help them develop in this area? So not really trying to force it on them, but maybe this week you just try something, so you think, you know what, my wee one doesn't do like much projective play, so this week we'll just try and do something on projective play. Or, you know, I'll get a bit of like a few things out and we'll just try a bit of like fancy dress and pretend to be different characters or something. So, you know, just give that a wee shot, just playing in one of these kind of styles of play. The second sentence doesn't apply because you all have children. None of you are waiting to be matched or placed. So that is my bit. Does anyone have any questions or comments they want to make?
I was thinking of quite a lot of the children that I've met through like social work and working with foster carers. There's quite a few that are quite sensitive to noise and sound, and that can be something that they struggle with in play. Thinking that's
a real big one for me, is because I have a very busy household, and the young man that's with me, he's been with me 7 years, he's autistic and has learning disabilities, and he's very sensitive to sound. And then when you've got two energetic 1 and 2 year olds running around and playing and boisterous, you really do have to find that balance and separate areas of play and activities to juggle. It really is a massive thing, that.
Yeah, you've got a job on your hands there, Lynn. Yeah. You have to
it's an enjoyable one though.
Yeah, it must be hard, just, you know, especially when like your wee ones are 1 and 2.
Yeah,
you know, it's really hard. They don't really understand the concept of being quiet, do they?
Yeah.
So
no, not at all. Not at all.
You can ask, but it really falls on deaf ears, doesn't it? Because they just don't even have the concept of being quiet, and they've got no volume button, have they?
You know, and it's like when you're buying them, you're not buying them the best earphones because you want to spend your money. It's because it helps to watch Netflix and watch his movie because he's 14. Although in his body, in his mind he's not, but in his body he is, and that helps him to block out the sound, and then you can do the activities and the boisterous play with the younger ones, while the other one's still appeased and happy and comforting his own as well.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of different issues, and especially when I worked in the children's homes as well. I mean, you know, you're only on 2 floors and you're limited to the space, that the creativity that you have to find and the resources that you have to use to get the best for each individual child. And that's the main thing. It's making sure that each individual has got the best outcome of every activity and every play, not just focusing on one individual, that you're trying to do the best for everybody that's in your care. Really.
That's right. There must be a lot of learning in that for them too, about how to kind of rub along well together and to kind of like accommodate each other's kind of needs and you know, interests. It can't be easy.
And ultimately it develops life skills.
I was thinking about I used to work for an organisation that set up a children's home for Black young people, and one of the philosophies about it was that they wanted young people with learning difficulties and non-disabled young people living together. And at that time, I mean, this was in the 80s, late 80s, that Ofsted really struggled with it. But our argument was that in a family, you will have a mix of young people, and you manage that. And I think we manage that very well. But it is a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
It is, definitely.
Yeah. Yoni, you don't look like you're old enough to be working in the 80s. Must have been your first time,
no, it was the 90s. I'm exaggerating slightly. But I am old enough.
Lynn, have you ever tried with your older boy, like giving him sensory experiences? Because it just reminds me of, I used to work with a boy, well, it wasn't a boy really, it was like 15, 16, I think. It was like in a residential home for young people with like very complex physical, complex physical and learning disabilities. He'd had hydrocephalus and was like really affected by it. But he used to come to me for play therapy, and he just really found, again, his niche was standing. It could be messy, right? But he really got into the stand, and it just really just relaxed him. And like normally when children play with sand, they'd use characters and stuff, and I can kind of see like a story emerging that maybe kind of tallies along with their own personal life stories. And I couldn't see the story in his so much because he was non-verbal. But it just seemed to just kind of just give him a great sense of peace. And actually then when his dad used to come and visit him, and just sometimes with the staff, they actually got like a sand tray, and they just used to like let him have time with the sand tray. I think pretty much every day in the end, because he just got so much just pleasure and contentment from working with the sand.
Yeah, and things like that are absolutely brilliant, and I've done that in the children's home environment, but with the young person that I've got, because he's so nurturing. Even though he's 14, 15 this year, he's at the functioning age of a 6-year-old, but he can't stand, due to his autism, he can't stand dirt, he can't stand mess. You know, he folds his clothes up to put them in the laundry basket. And when the little ones are in the playroom, happily playing, he's going in, tidying all the toys up and putting them back, and because he can't stand the mess. So you've got to split things into two, and it's like, right, when my daughter's off work or my partner's at home, it's great because you've got an extra set of hands, but then that's where the imaginative skills come in, and the imaginative play, and picking up the tips from already what I've heard on the recording last week and the first week. It's just those little things that go a long way. Really,
the small things make the difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the good weather, paddling pool on one side, and you know, different activities on the other side and things like that. They make massive differences, and people's personal experiences and their tips and advices are massive.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely massive.
Oh, fab. Anyone else? I'm just mindful a bit of time. Anyone else got any other questions or comments that they'd like to make?
Well, just picking up from what Lynn's just said about the 7-year-old that lives with me at the moment, he cannot stand mess. He can't stand any sort of goo or anything like that. It really dysregulates him, and he run around like, oh, my hand. And it's really tricky. I mean, is that sort of a sign that he missed out on that first level, or is that just him?
Sometimes it can just be from like the past experiences, that stuff like the sensory stuff can dysregulate them, that they find it difficult to kind of tolerate sensations like that. Has he got autism or anything like this?
It's not diagnosed. I think they were looking at it where he's only been with me since July, and his previous home, they started sort of looking into it, but I don't think he has a diagnosis as such.
Yeah, so it could be something like autism, or some like real heightened sensitivity. But if you wanted to kind of explore stuff like that, just start with maybe just putting a bit of stuff like dried pasta or lentils, rice, where it's not stuff that is not gooey and doesn't kind of like stick. They can be quite easily.
Yeah, I think he would play with that. Yeah, he would play with anything that's dry, anything slightly damp or gooey. With what? Sorry.
Ice. So you could put like those little animals. We could put some little animals in some ice and freeze it, and then you could, whilst it's warm, as it melts, unpick the animals out and have that sensation of it being frozen to being a liquid.
Oh, I could try it. I don't know how he would react with that, but yeah, that's an interesting one.
Something that quite a few people have found quite good is filling balloons with like corn flour or something like that, and then tying it up, and so it's the feeling's quite nice, but it's also quite clean.
He does like squishy toys. He does like squishy things. He's constantly got a squishy in his hands, but he just doesn't like mess or goo or anything like that, which I'm quite happy about. I don't wish to embrace that if he doesn't, but I just wondered if that was a sign that he'd missed out on something, or whether that might just be him.
I had a boy, and he used to come into my session, and he used to fill balloons with sand, and it makes quite a weighted feeling, but also when you squeezed it, the balloon held quite a good position for a while too, so it's quite good. And also, I don't know what they're called, right, but it must be the latest craze. They're like the plastic, they come in different shapes, and it's like rows of like dots, and you can pop them.
Poppets. Yeah, we've got those. They love them.
I can't remember. I don't know what they're called.
Well, we call them poppets. That's what they're called around here, but I don't know.
And again, that's a sensory experience and stuff. So if they can't tolerate the real gooey, messy stuff, even stuff like that can be good. And maybe if it was just from past experience, that maybe over time you would just be able to build up, to then maybe like tolerating holding a piece of chalk, or and just kind of gradually building it up. If that is the reason why he struggles so much with the sensory experience.
Because, for example, he can't feed the animals with a pouch of food. That sort of squishiness, he doesn't like. Yeah.
Well, we'll give those a go. I like the ice idea as well. My son would love something like that, actually. Thanks for the tip. I'm going to try that one. We're all learning together. All right. Okay. Anyone else, or should I just pass over to Yoni? I'm going to just take the screen share. There we go.
All right. Well, thank you so much for another really interesting conversation and session, Keeley and everyone here. I'm gonna. I got an apology from Michelle. I think people with half term are just busy this week, but which is, I've written a note to maybe skip half term next time. So thanks for that. But thank you very much for coming, on such a glorious day as well. Even in Manchester, so that I know it must be pretty impressive. So yeah, I will try and remember to send out the reminders for the next session, 7:30 next week. And do you want to just recap on the homework to watch your child and identify whether they are, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, using embodiment play, projected play, or role play in the self-directed play that they're doing.
Yeah, so just have a look, see what kind of play that they normally kind of engage in, and then if you kind of feel like there's an area where they don't kind of play a lot, maybe just try and introduce an activity like that to the play this week, and we'll reflect on it next week and see how you got on with that. And I'm going to try the ice, and I'll tell you how I got on with that. So.
And I'm going to go and play with my puppet. So have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.